Okay, so we're going to have a look at how to do a screen replacement in Adobe After Effects. To start with, before I even start trying to track this shot, this is 4K media and it's processing a little bit slowly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the clip, right mouse button click, and go down to Create Proxy, and I'm going to create a movie. In the render queue, I can go and choose what settings. Now, because it's doing a proxy, it's already set to draft settings. I'm going to actually drop it down from half resolution down to third resolution. It's still going to make it 1280 by 720. And that's going to mean it's going to run a lot faster. If I OK that, I'm going to go into the output module. I don't want it to be an uncompressed QuickTime file, which is the default on a Mac. I'm going to go and make it Apple ProRes 422. So it's still broadcast quality, but it's just going to be a lot smaller. Of course, if you need all the resolution, then I would recommend generally processing it at full resolution, but sometimes you just want to work through things quite quickly, and working with proxies is a faster workflow. I'm going to choose where that goes. Probably a best place to put that would be next to the original. So it's already found the original location. I'm just going to rename it Proxy. Then I'll hit Save, and then I'll hit Render. That's made the proxy file. Now, when the proxy file is made, if I have a look in my project panel, the original clip now has a little box next to it. Now, if I look up here, I can see I've got the original media, which is 4K, and then I've got another file, which is the proxy file, which is 1280 by 720. And I can turn the proxy on and off just by hitting the square button. And it very subtly shows you the one that's slightly bolder is the one that's being enabled. So I'm using the proxy now. Now I'm using the original. I'm using the proxy, the original. You can see in this case there's a slight difference because of the compression of the proxy from the original. Of course, when I export, I'm going to be exporting with the original, but to work in After Effects, it may be faster to work using the proxy. Now, I'm going to turn off the proxy for a moment because I want to send this over to mockup with the full resolution, but then when we comp later on, we'll speed it up using the proxy. So let's go back to our comp. Let's select the clip. We want to go to Animation, Track in Boris Effects Mocha. Click icon to open the Mocha interface. It's going to tell me that because I've got a proxy file here, it's telling me, look, do you want to use the proxy or the full resolution? Make sure you have the right one selected. I'm going to say continue. But obviously, if you were in proxy mode and you wanted Mocha to work at full resolution, you'd want to make sure you're viewing the full resolution. So here we are in Mocha, the After Effects edition, a slightly cut down version from the original. And we've got different options in here. I'm not going to get too detailed into Mocha, but basically we're going to have a look at drawing a shape to track. And we're going to use this tool called the X-Spline tool. It's similar to the pen tool in After Effects, except the shape is already closed. So I'm going to go to each corner of my iMac screen, there, and there, and you can see it's already a closed shape. I don't need to close it, but if I don't want to make any more points, I right mouse button click. Once that's done, I can modify the points by going to the inner blue handle, and I can move that around. And if I grab the outer blue handle, I can increase the curvature or straighten it out a little bit more. So I'm just going to tweak those edges. Now, this is what we call the planar surface. Mocha is a planar tracker, so it looks for flat surfaces to track along. So unlike After Effects that uses a point tracker, just looks one point, the planar surface can track everything within here, and it works best on a flat plane. So this screen or mobile device, something like that, is really what it's really solid at doing. Once I've set up the surface that it's going to track, of course I want to track, so I can go over here and have a look in the Essentials panel, and I want to track the transform, the scale, the rotation, skew, and definitely in this case I want perspective, so I enable perspective option. And with my playhead there near the beginning, I'm just going to track it forwards and just let it run through. Because I relinked it back for this part of the process back to the original media, obviously it's on the 4K. If you want a most solid result, you will use the original media, but again, sometimes you just need to work quickly, so you could have sent the proxy over here. If I grab my playhead and move it backwards and forwards, I can see the tracking looks pretty solid. I could send that data to After Effects now and it will create a matte for this shape here. But actually what I want to do is I want to create a planar surface so I can replace the screen part of the image. So I'm going to use this option here, show surface, and it's going to create a little box, and I've got 4 little corner points that I can move. Now I'm going to move these up into the corner points of the screen. And if you want to zoom in and out, you've got these navigation tools here. So I can grab my magnifying tool and just zoom in on there. Grab back to my tool there. Now, when you're moving these points, I'd usually recommend not having it perfectly snug, but maybe just a little bit bigger, because if you need to modify it later, you can come back to the Mocha and tweak the Mocha results, but sometimes it's a bit quicker if you've applied it. If it's a little bit too big, once you get into After Effects, you can always add something like a matte choker to shrink it down. But if it's too small, chances are you have to come back into Mocha and just move these points out. So I normally have them a little bit wider than they need to be to start with. Now I don't need to go and track that now because that's already applied to the tracking data that I've done. That's what this layer 1 is. I could rename it, you don't need to, but if you've got multiple layers, it makes sense to rename them. So I'll call that iMac screen. And then if I've got that selected, I can see now if I grab and move up and down, I can see that's now pretty solidly tracked on there. I can also enable a grid just if I want to just check, and if that grid is jiggling around a little bit, you know your track is not solid, but I can see I've got a very solid track. I can see the perspective is right. So I'm going to press this button here. That's going to save the project data, and then I'm going to close down Mocha, and that data is now contained within the Mocha AE effect. If I need to go back into Mocha, I just click on that and it covers the results. In this case, I don't want to do that. Now I've got 2 options of what I can do with that information. I can export that as a matte, or I can bring through the tracking data. Now we want to bring through the tracking data, but to show you what the matte option does, I'll tore that open. If I choose view matte, it's going to show me the alpha matte of the apply matte. You can see it will use that matte directly onto the footage. Turn on my transparency grid, so now you can see I basically just rotoed out the iMac screen. So the 2 big uses for Boris FX Mocha in After Effects is one to create mattes like this, rotoscoping in traditional sense, and the other one is to create tracking data, which is what we're going to do. So I'm just going to unselect that, close down the matte option, and what I actually want to do is want to go to tracking data, and in tracking data I'm going to bring the tracking data from Mocha into the effect. So I'll hit create tracking data. It's going to say what layer from. Now we only have 1 layer, so it's easy, but if you've got multiple layers in Mocha, you may choose 1 or multiple. I'm going to choose this one, okay. And it's going to bring through lots of animation for all the corner pin points. Now that's not going to do anything yet. We have to apply it to a layer. And we don't have a layer in here just yet, so we're going to make a layer. Now this is the very important thing with Mocha in AE, is that we need to apply it to a layer that's exactly the same size as the footage, because Mocha's understanding corner pinning, which is what it's doing here, and using it based on the same dimensions as the footage. Now let's say we want to put an image in here that's not the same dimensions. Well, this is what I'd recommend to do, is make a solid layer first. So I'm going to go layer, new, solid. I'll make it, well, I'll go for red because it's obviously nice and obvious. There's my red solid. Now if I go back to my clip, back to Mocha, now I can choose how do I want to export it, as a corner pin or as a corner pin that supports motion blur or just a transform. Well, I definitely want to use the corner pin. And if the shot is moving fast enough for you to have motion blur, then the motion blur would be a good option. In this case, I am going to choose motion blur. And then you choose what layer you want to apply it to. And that's going to be my deep red solid. And then I just hit apply export. Now if I play back, I can see my red solid is corner pinned really quite accurately inside of the iMac screen. But of course I don't just want a red screen there, do I? I want my image there. So I'm going to go and find the image that I want to put in there. I've got it loaded in already, so let me just go and clear my search, go into my assets, into my images, into my SE desktop. Now this is a different size and resolution than the footage. So what I need to do with this solid is I need to pre-compose it. So I'll select it, I'll go to layer, I'll go to pre-compose, and I'm going to get some options. If you've got just one layer and you pre-compose, you have the option to leave all attributes or to move all attributes. Now, in this case, you want to leave all the attributes. That means that the animation keyframes that Mocha has created, as well as the corner pin effect, will stay in this comp and will just move the solid into a pre-comp. So I'd usually make this a little bit more of a helpful name. So I'll call it iMac Screen Pre-Comp, so I know what that is. And now it's moved the solid into the pre-comp, but if I press U to uncover keyframes, I can see all the keyframes for the corner pin, position, scale, rotation are still in here. That's not important, I just wanted to show you that you don't need to do that. So let's open up the solid, double click. I'm now inside the pre-comp with the solid, and I don't actually need this solid in here, so I could delete it or turn it off. And I'll go and grab my image, drag that into the comp. You can see it's too small. It's also not the same ratio, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to just select, go to layer, go to transform, and go down to fit to comp. That will stretch it out to exactly the same size as the composition. And then now if I go back to my main comp, boom, you can see straight away it's now stretched that out to fit on the iMac screen. So if I play that back, I can now see my Soho Editor's desktop image now composited onto the iMac screen. And of course that could have some footage on it, it could have some animation on it. It's just static in this case, but it could be anything. That's how you can do a screen replacement in After Effects using Boris FX Mocha.